All right, welcome everyone once again. My name is Sanjeet. I'm from Jelly Social. And today we have a really interactive discussion on diversity and inclusion. Specifically, how can you and I get beyond those two buzzwords, diversity and inclusion, and actually make it real in San Diego? So we have an awesome panel of experts that are on hand for this session today. And you're gonna get tons of opportunities to interact with each of us, ask us questions, and also just be a really big part of this discussion here. Now, what brings us all together here today is really this simple statement. Some of us face barriers due to our diversity. And that's really the bare truth right there. And as true as it is, many of us have spent a good part of our existence doing what we can to avoid that truth. But things have changed. There's a lot that's been going on in the country over the past 6 months to a year. And now instead of running away from that truth, many of us are now turning to face it. So many of us now acknowledge that this is actually a problem. And the great news is that so many of us are now ready to do something about it. And that's why we've come together here today to have this conversation. So we've assembled a panel of 3 experts who will each be sharing tips and strategies on how each of us can make diversity, equity, and inclusion real in our San Diego communities. And we'll have each of them present a little bit about their background. They'll be given some tips, some strategies, as I mentioned, on from their personal experiences, how we can actually make diversity and inclusion real. So we'll be moving on to that portion a little bit later on, but you'll hear from myself, you'll hear from Fazina Hanif, and you also hear from Dr. Baljeet Kamba. By the time we're done this session, you're gonna walk away with 3 things here. You're gonna understand your personal influence in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. You're gonna recognize opportunities on making DEI actionable. And you're also gonna be applying actions that foster DEI in your own community. So I'm just gonna jump right into my portion of this presentation. So this session is being facilitated by Jelly Social, which is a nonprofit organization led by myself, Sanjeet Kamba, and Amanda Russell, who is also on this call. Now, Jelly Social is at the forefront of the BetterByDiversity movement, which is an initiative that empowers diverse professionals just like you to spark inclusive change in your local cities, schools, and businesses. Now, to explain the BetterByDiversity movement, I'm first gonna introduce the concept of the silo network. Now, many of us as professionals, we're already in a silo network where we act as separate individuals competing with each other for opportunities. And that's what we're seeing in that diagram at the top of the page there, is just how a silo network operates. Now, in a silo network, some of us get those opportunities while the majority don't. And that's what we're seeing in that diagram there, where some people are benefiting, but the majority are unfortunately left on the outside. Now, over time, what starts to happen is a gap begins to form. And this is really the unfortunate reality of many diverse professionals who experience this gap as a wage gap, an identity gap, and a leadership gap. But in a BetterByDiversity network, which is what we're seeing at the bottom of the page here, in a BetterByDiversity network, we don't see those gaps forming. The key feature of a BetterByDiversity network is that we don't compete for opportunities, but instead we co-create and share opportunities that benefit everyone. So this results in just a free flow of opportunity that benefits everybody, gives everyone an equal chance to thrive. Now, our work at Jelly Social is really to create these types of BetterByDiversity networks in cities, businesses, and schools all across the country. Now, I'm just going to present you with a few numbers here just to illustrate what we're hoping to achieve with the BetterByDiversity movement. So I'm going to direct your attention over here to that box at the top of the page here. So this is illustrating the wage gap. For every $1 earned by a Caucasian male a male of color earns 73 cents and a female of color earns 58 cents. So this is the wage gap that we're hoping to close. And this next box over here, 45% of people of color say they have to compromise their authenticity in order to fit into the workplace. So this is what we call the identity gap. And lastly, of all documented leadership positions, only 9.75% are held by men of color and 6.5% are held by women of color. So this is what we call the leadership gap. So the inspiration behind the BetterByDiversity movement is to enlist each of us as professionals to take real actions that close each of these gaps. Now, the big question, of course, is how do we do that? And quite simply, our answer is diverse collaboration. Every time we collaborate with other diverse professionals, we're actually co-creating opportunities and sharing opportunities that benefit all. So every time we collaborate with a diverse professional, we're creating this free flow of opportunity that everyone can access and everyone can benefit from so that everybody can thrive. Now, since diverse collaboration is so important in a BetterByDiversity network, I just wanted to take a few minutes here to really define those two words. So when we say diverse, we actually have a really broad definition of diversity. So to us, there's actually two different types of diversity. There's inherent diversity, which refers to things like our race, our gender, our age, and so on. And then there's something called acquired diversity, which relates to our education, our experience, our skills, our value, and so on. So as I'm saying this, I'm sure you can already think of several layers of diversity that you already possess, either inherent diversity or acquired diversity. And that's a really good thing because that actually brings us to the diversity storm. So I'm going to pause for just a couple of minutes right now, and we're going to do a really quick interactive exercise that's going to show you just how many different layers of diversity are represented in this room right now. So I'm going to pause the presentation. Okay, now what I want you to do is open up the chat messenger in Zoom. So the chat messenger that you see on the side there, and I want you to type in all of the different layers of diversity that you possess. So again, think of both inherent diversity and acquired diversity. And I want you to just type it in your chat messenger, send it out to the entire group. So we're going to pause for 2 minutes to do this, which we call the diversity storm. So I'm going to start typing in here as well. All right, now some things I'm already seeing in the chat coming up here. I see Asian, I see engineer, I see social change maker, I see indigenous, I see cis female, I see Southeast Asian, event coordinator, college graduate, mother, Guyanese, marketing, 40 years old. But keep them coming, just keep typing things out there that, that you think apply to you in terms of your diversity. Cancer thriver, mentally ill, bilingual, bicultural. Asian, Trinidadian, brown-skinned, researcher, educator, detail-oriented. Mexican first-generation student, grandmother, 70 years old, Irish American. All right, so we're gonna pause right there. And really what we were trying to illustrate here with the diversity storm is that, you know, in some way, shape, or form, all of us have different things that we can point to as being elements that make us diverse. So a lot of times we think of diversity as, you know, not really applying to us, but as you can see in the chat there, you know, there's so many things that make us diverse. So when I talk about diversity, it actually speaks to each and every one of us in some way, shape, or form. So all of us are actually diverse people. And we need to really embrace that and really understand that, you know, that we're all kind of in this together as diverse people trying to work with one another and trying to advance things and trying to advance the diversity agenda. So that's the whole purpose of the diversity storm. And great job, everyone. I'm just going to jump right back into my presentation. Now, I just want to touch on the other keyword, which is collaboration. Now, we have a really basic definition of collaboration, again, at Jelly Social. And for us, collaboration is just a simple act of support for our peers, however we can offer that support. So this could be something as simple as advice or mentorship. It could be an introduction to someone that can help. It could be a social media shout out or a repost. It could be sharing our skills or resources, or it could even be something like a joint venture or a project. So basically, there's just a wide spectrum of ways that we can collaborate. But the key message here is that any kind of collaboration support makes a huge difference. And that's the collaboration mindset that we have in a Better by Diversity network. Now, our role at Jelly Social is to make diverse collaboration really easy for you to do in your workplace, in your community, or in your school. And that's why we've created something called the Better by Diversity Challenge. So this is something that we've perfected over 5 years, and I kid you not, thousands of people have actually used it to make diversity and inclusion real in their own communities. Now, the challenge is actually really simple. So we challenge you to have the following conversation 5 times with 5 different diverse professionals this month. And the conversation is really simple. Number 1, what is your personal or professional story? So this is going to help us understand, the background of some of the people that, maybe work with us, maybe some people in our community, getting to know, what it is that makes them tick, what it is that brings them here into our community. So understanding their personal story. 2, what's your next big professional goal? So understanding, what it is that they're trying to strive for. What is it that they hope to achieve? And lastly, how can I help you get closer to your goal? So this opens up the door for collaboration. This allows us to see exactly how we can fit in terms of our skills, our resources, our capabilities to help somebody, another diverse professional, achieve their goal. So this really opens up that door for collaboration. And really, that's it. That's the Better by Diversity Challenge. And the beauty of this is that every time you do it, you're actually taking a direct action to make diversity and inclusion real in your workplace, in your community, and in your school. So we encourage you to go to our website. Just go to jellysocial.ca/challenge, and you can sign up to take a pledge to take this challenge. And we encourage you to send that link out to your colleagues as well, and get them in on the action as well. And that's actually one of our services too at Jelly Social. So just imagine 100 of your coworkers or community members all taking the Better by Diversity Challenge at the same time in an online event. So that's an amazing experience, and it really amplifies our impact exponentially. So I encourage you to check out our website, jellysocial.ca/challenge. Again, share that out to your colleagues, and let's get everybody in on this. Let's get everybody taking those small actions to make diversity, equity, and inclusion real in our communities. So I'm just gonna wrap things up now and throw things over to our next presenter, which is Fazina Hanif. And she's actually the founder of the Conscious Communicator. She's a communication expert with 20 years of experience. She's a board certified master coach, consultant, speaker, and facilitator of challenging conversations. Fazina works with BIPOC entrepreneurs and professionals to become powerful communicators and leaders by breaking free from disempowering social, cultural, and familial dynamics that impact voice. Her work with organizations include establishing sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion foundations, unconscious bias training, and organizational change and communication consulting. So I'm going to throw things over to Fazina.
Thank you, Sanjeet, and hello, everyone. I'm just gonna pop my presentation up here. Perfect. All right. So Thank you again, Sanjeet, for that introduction. Sanjeet shared with us how we can go beyond the buzzwords in businesses and organizations in our community to make diversity, equity, and inclusion real and sustainable. I'm going to talk about now a very important ingredient to making that a reality, and that's the individual and the inner work that we each have to do to ensure that we're approaching diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives from as clear a lens as possible. So specifically what I'm going to be looking at in this short period of time is unconscious bias and why it's important to understand and to shift. So as Sanjeet shared, I bring the lens of conscious communication to this discussion. And having spent 20 years in the communication industry, namely in public relations and corporate communications, I've watched organizations do a lot of things that have worked and a lot of things that have not worked. And so with the individuals and organizations where success happened, we had leaders who were coachable and willing to take responsibility for the inner work they needed to do so that they could have the outer success that they wanted. So it is with organizations and individuals I work with anti-racism and unconscious bias training programs that I facilitate as well. So the individuals and organizations that recognize the importance of the inner work have a greater chance of success in implementing true diversity and sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So let's talk a bit about where we are. I mean, we've reached a tipping point. I think we can all agree to that. 2020 has no doubt been a catalyst for awakenings in many, many ways. And individual and systemic racism and oppression have come into 2020 view. Inequities in society, in industries, in organizations, which have long existed, are now more apparent and blatant to more people, and they cannot be unseen. The current situation that we find ourselves in has left many of us self-reflecting and asking questions about how we live and how we function in the world around us. We've entered into, I guess you can call it, an age of accountability and a real opportunity to look at how we ourselves are contributing to exclusion. And what I found in my work with individuals and organizations is that while many want to change and have that intention to change, they're not quite sure where to start and where to begin. So we're going to start here. What we don't know we carry causes harm. What we don't know we carry causes harm. That's a curious statement, isn't it? And it's one that I'll deconstruct for you in this very short amount of time that we have today. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to the conscious and unconscious mind. Now, we often use the metaphor of the iceberg to describe the difference between the conscious and unconscious mind. Now, our conscious mind makes up 5 to 10% of who we are, while our unconscious mind makes up 90 to 95% of who we are. So in other words, our conscious mind is all that's in our awareness, and in our unconscious mind is all that is outside of our awareness. At any given moment, our senses are taking in approximately 11 million bits of information per second. And that number may actually have increased. Just an FYI on that. That's a whole lot of information, is it not? Now, and so what happens is that to make sense of it all, we have to delete, distort, and generalize all that information so that our conscious mind can process approximately about 50 bits per second, right, out of that 11 million. And then the unconscious mind will process the rest. And here's the catch. We delete distort, and generalize based on our filters. And what are our filters? Our filters are how we make sense and meaning out of the world. It's a culmination of the messages we've received and experiences we've had early on in our life that provide the lens through which we see ourselves and others and the world around us. Our filters come from family, culture, society, experiences of trauma, the time in history during which we live, TV and movies, the media, books, school. Is passed down from generation to generation. And it's from our filters that we create unconscious bias. Again, based on the messages we've received about certain groups of people in society. And those messages then influence how we interact with those people. And you'll see very soon how that works. So what is unconscious bias? Unconscious bias is beliefs about certain groups of people that influence, or about, groups of people that individuals form outside of their conscious awareness. So again, we're dealing with that 90 to 95% we just talked about. Now, as I said earlier, unconscious bias drives how we interact with people based on our beliefs about them that lie outside of our awareness. And here are things that influence, or that our unconscious bias influence. So who we see as authority and who authority looks like, who we trust and who we don't trust, who we feel safe around and who we feel unsafe around, who we hire and who we don't hire, who we pay and how much we pay them, or if we don't pay them at all, who to speak on panels, who we choose in political campaigns, who we see as peacemakers versus troublemakers, and so on. We could go on and on and on. Now think about the impact on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives if individuals aren't doing the inner work to become aware of unconscious bias. Like just looking at this list, if we're not aware of unconscious bias, what's going into our decision-making process with just this list is a huge question that all of us have to ask ourselves. So DEI without examining individual unconscious bias leads to failed DEI. And why is that? Because at the end of the day, people create the policies and processes of DEI initiatives. And if we aren't aware of the ways that we are excluding others and suppressing others and not creating the best environment for people to thrive in, then it doesn't matter how great the policies are or the initiative is, we are bringing those biases in all of our decision making. And it really becomes a sort of self-sabotage, right? Because the intentions are there. We want to create this environment of DEI, and we're not sure. We're not even knowing what is seeping in to our actual implementation and execution of those policies. So what do we do? Well, we really need to start getting to know our biases, right? We need to start doing that. And I know a lot of people ask that question when I'm doing the unconscious bias program. And this is where we start. 4 types of unconscious bias. The first one, affinity bias. We are more likely to trust somebody like us. So where are we choosing others like us and excluding others who have a lot of value to add, but we're closed off from actually including them and bringing them in? The second one we need to pay attention to is confirmation bias. So we have a tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs. Now, where are we looking to be right about people and losing out on the opportunity to add diversity and strength? The third one, anchoring bias, where we're relying too much on an initial piece of information when making a decision about someone. Now, where are we clinging to old information and closing ourselves off from getting new information? Again, losing the opportunity to add diversity and strength. And last, stereotype bias. So assuming that someone has specific traits because of the group they belong to. Where are we grouping people together instead of looking at the individual and themselves as an individual and not grouping them with others and losing out again? So it's our individual responsibility to look at how these biases show up in our lives and in our work to create sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we're not taking on that responsibility, we're really not doing the change the way the change needs to be done. We're not going to create sustainable change. So it's really important that we do this individual work, and it's all of us. All of us have these biases that we need to dig into so that we can contribute to creating environments where people thrive and feel like they belong. And so that's what I have for you today. I'd be happy to connect with anyone that wanted to continue this conversation or explore looking at unconscious bias training or working through how those biases affect us as diverse people. You can find my information here on the screen. And I am going to pass this over to our next presenter, who I'm pleased to introduce. Dr. Baljit Kamba is an assistant professor at Bastyr University and a licensed naturopathic doctor in both California and Ontario, Canada. Dr. Kamba has a focus on mental health care across culturally diverse communities, particularly in developing patient empowerment through the tenets of naturopathic medicine. The expression of mental illness, such as depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder, are varied across cultures. Through gaining an understanding of a person's unique background, Dr. Kamba uses the tools within naturopathic medicine to assist in their health journey. Furthermore, Dr. Kamba teaches these concepts to students at Bastyr University so that the students may appreciate and learn the cultural influences that impact health across a wide range of cultures. Lastly, Dr. Kamba has published research papers presented in conferences around the world and has acted as a moderator on panels. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Baljit Kamba.
Thank you, Fazina. That was a great introduction, and I really appreciate your conversation, particularly around unconscious biases. And I have to really take a step back and look at the aspect around filters, like you had mentioned, which I think plays such a key role. And it's something as you're unpacking sort of those 4 biases that you had mentioned, it really it gives me a chance to step back and try to take a look and see how unconscious biases may have been playing a role in projections that I may make, as well as those that have been received onto me as well. And I know one thing that I teach to my students alongside when I'm looking at these unconscious biases is the word stigma. And the word stigma usually kind of goes hand in hand with unconscious biases and how that makes us feel. But so yes, anyway, so thank you. I love listening to all these. These are conversations that I'm so thrilled that we're all having now, because it's something that's much needed in the world. And I'm just going to place my timer because otherwise being a professor, I love to talk, so I could just keep going. So I'm going to make sure I have my timer here and set things right. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending our talk. Jelly Social and everything around the BetterByDiversity challenge that's going on. They've done a lot of really hard work. So let me share my screen. Share. Okay, wonderful. So my take on things, so I'll let you know a little bit about me. I'm, as Fazina had mentioned, I'm a professor at Bastyr University in San Diego. Where I'm not only am I teaching there, but I'm also a clinic supervisor, so I see patients as well. And being a person who is South Asian and a female, I feel like I draw upon a lot of diverse, I get to have a lot of sort of diversity conversations with my patients. And so I hope to share some of the stories, and as well as to give some insights as well. So here I'm going to give you some of my own personal background, as well as some of my clinic and professional background, and kind of meld that all together and see where it comes up as far as life lessons on diversity, equity, inclusion from the lens of naturopathic medicine. And so you'll hear me talk a little bit about me and my sort of story, what naturopathic medicine is, and then sort of looking at that DEI lens and how that sort of applies to naturopathic medicine and how we can continue to take lessons from there. So allow me to begin by telling you a little bit about my story. And so my story begins, you see the Indian flag there. So I'm Indian by background. I'm born in Canada. I'm a first generation Canadian, or first generation, my parents were immigrants who had moved to Canada. And myself and my brother Sanjeet were born here. And so I carry with me that, as something that a lot of first generation or a lot of immigrants, the children of immigrants can relate to, where there's that close tie that parents have to their culture and their sort of upbringing and history that sort of is put onto you. But then you're also torn because you're in this new country. And as a person who was born here or born within North America, I'm one that had to go through sort of the processes of immersing myself in this culture. And so now I have, it's sometimes it feels like you don't sort of fit in either world, or you fit in both worlds. It's sort of the background. Now, taking from that, I took the positive aspects of a lot of that sort of thing, of having those two backgrounds, where I got to really open my mind and see how that can relate to all these different factors, such as nutrition, health, teaching. And so I wanted to make that story part of my sort of ongoing trajectory of care. So I moved into becoming a naturopathic doctor. I was solely in a clinic, and I also researched. And then I wanted to be able to teach other students. And so I started working at Bastyr as a professor, where I teach there, I research there, and I also have clinic. Now, I was working there doing lots of great stuff, and I loved what I was doing. I was able to apply some of my own cultural background into my teaching and into the things that I do. And then all of a sudden I find out that I ended up with breast cancer. I felt a lump in my breast. And so I had to take a step back, where I took a bit of a sabbatical, and I lessened my teaching load so that I can focus on myself. And I got to see for myself for the first time what it's like to be a patient and having to advocate for my own health, having to defend the choices that I make for my own health, and to see what it looks like as a woman of color to experience health from my perspective, to know what sort of risk factors I had to develop this triple negative breast cancer. And unfortunately, it was a breast cancer that was far along in stage. It was a stage 3. Fortunately, it was treated, and I used both naturopathic medicine and conventional medicine. I did both chemotherapy, and so this is my hair now growing back. It was a year ago that I just finished chemotherapy and my surgeries, and I continue to keep going with further surgeries and developments and all sorts of stuff. And you can read about my story if you go into my website at foodandmood.co. You'll see more of my story there, and you can read about the things that I'd gone through from a mental health standpoint, from a variety of different perspectives, to see where sort of health comes in. And then as well as to be able to advocate for myself. I wanted to, advocacy for me means education. So healthcare in the 21st century, what we know is that 80% of the world tends to use traditional and complementary therapies. So if 80% of the world is using medicine that comes from our culture and traditions around us, well, then only 20% of the world, and that's usually in the industrialized nations, are using this modern form of medicine. And so that really tells us that this traditions of complementary medicine really plays a key role in how we see things and how we sort of anticipate viewing the world and how we sort of approach life in general. So tradition, and an extension to that, our diversity, because we all bring tradition, we all bring culture, we all bring all that sort of stuff. And I encourage you I'm going to ask you a question, and let's sort of see how that traditional complementary medicine really plays a role in our health today. So I'm going to ask you, and please feel free to drop this in the chat. When you have the common cold, right? What sort of remedies do you know about from your culture and tradition, things that you've grown up with that you use? So what sort of things? Like I know in my culture and things that my mom would make, she would brew us a tea with ginger and turmeric and a whole bunch of things like that. So ginger, turmeric, I think, and the honey is usually at the end of it all. And I'd be drinking that for whatever period of time I have a cold for. So I'd love to hear, so feel free to drop it in the chat. What are some of your home remedies and things that you've done growing up? Ginger garlic soup, yes. White rum and honey. Plain rice porridge to cleanse the system, yeah. Bone broth, good. Hot and spicy soup, Vicks. Excellent. Lemon, honey, and ginger. Whiskey, honey, and lemon hot toddies. My husband's from Northern Ireland, so he loves a hot toddy. Whiskey, honey, lemon with those cloves in there as well. Gargle with salt water, yeah. Excellent. All right, wonderful. Feel free to keep dropping, keep putting things in there that you've used, and I can encourage you to continue that conversation while I go through this. And that really just demonstrates that food can be such a great equalizer when it comes to traditions, when it comes to diversity, that it can be this great leveling place. So for example, when Sanjeet had mentioned the BetterByDiversity challenge, and in having those conversations, one of the great equalizers can also be food. So we know that because complementary and alternative medicine, these traditional forms of medicine, people spend about $30 billion within the US, and this represents about 9.2% of all out-of-pocket spending by Americans on healthcare and 1.1% of total healthcare. So this isn't the alternative. Complementary alternative medicine as a title isn't the alternative. It's a $30 billion industry that we're all using. And that includes all the honey and ginger and all the things that were mentioned that you guys had used. Those are all an important part of who we are. And they help to continue that language, not just of health, but it encourages us to advocate for ourselves, to have that place of empowerment. So the art of healing comes from nature, not from the physician. Therefore, the physician must start from nature with an open mind. This came from Paracelsus, who was one of the original people to talk about naturopathic medicine and how nature can be used to heal. So we really have to realize that healing, whether it's coming from biology, things that we need to heal, or things around us, right? So that could be healing from environmental factors or things that may have impacted us in other ways. So, from a mental wellness perspective, healing also comes from nature. If you go to Scotland, they recommend, the doctors are actually recommending for depression that you actually go out and go out to nature and have walks. So there's so many examples within a social context that nature plays a key role in healing. So I wonder if from, I want to put it out there that as we're going through and discussing all these concepts around diversity, equity, and inclusion, does the concept of nature and all that nature brings and natural healing and naturopathic medicine help with that tie to bring things together? So for those of you who are wondering, well, what is naturopathic medicine? Naturopathic medicine really encompasses these few factors here. It's a mindset of, like I mentioned, of using nature, which is in combination with modern science to help bring about healing. We have something called the therapeutic order, meaning that we want to address the underlying cause of disease. We want to see why something's occurring. And that why could be something biological. It could be a combination of biology, what's going on in the environment around us, social changes, all those types of things, whatever is happening in that entire atmosphere that could be causing it. Those are some of the things that we want to endorse, and then heal from that perspective and bring and use the tools. So the tools that we use within nature could be any of the following, such as nutrition, lifestyle, counseling, supplements. We use pharmaceuticals as well. Minor surgical procedures as well could be something that is used too, but all from the tenets of first do no harm. Let's use nature to heal us. We want to identify and treat the cause rather than just putting Band-Aids over the symptoms. We want to be teachers. We want to teach our patients. So that means we want to advocate for them. So from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, we want to be able to educate our patients on those factors. We want to treat the person as a whole. And our key message is we are preventative. We try to aim for preventative medicine and proactive medicine rather than symptom treatment, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. In certain situations, we need to deal with, I always say, if a person's having a heart attack, I can't throw enough herbs at them. I got to get them to ER right away. So our focus ends up being in that social realm. So what we want to do, and this is where diversity, equity, and inclusion, as my colleagues have discussed sort of the details around it, well, that sort of plays a role within here, sort of the outer environment. So education, healthcare, social, our environment, all those things impact our health. So all these things that are going on right now, the fact that we're in a pandemic, all the things that are going around racial injustice, and all those sort of things are all part of our environment that are going to impact our health. So we need to stand and become advocates for our own health and say, hey, this is impacting me and I need to be able to talk to somebody about it. So when we want to include this from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, they're not just like, as this talk is saying, it's not just buzzwords. When we talk about diversity and we talk about inclusion, they're outcomes. They're actual things that we're hoping to achieve, right? So what we want to do is, and then equity is the entire process. So when we think about it this way, and I put the invitation here, is diversity is like being invited to a party, whereas inclusion is being asked to dance. So it's not enough to be asked to the party. You also need to be, and just show up to the party, you also need to be included. So you need to be asked to dance. Whereas equity becomes that process of that great equalizing process. So it's about ensuring that everyone within the diverse and inclusive populations can benefit from the same opportunities and same resources. So when you're advocating for yourself as a patient, or when I was advocating for myself as a patient, I wanted to look at patient experiences and make sure and see if any sort of imbalances existed. If there were imbalances within that process, within that entire area, then I knew there wasn't equity and I needed to express that. And so same thing, those are things that need to be expressed, that you need to work, that you can express as well. So I've put a few resources here. One of them that you can access, and they're free resources that are available to you. One is UCSD's anti-racism resources. The AAMC also has a number of educational resources, and Baxter University Clinic, where I work, we are also an environment where diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're sort of an area that promotes those topics as well. So I'll go back to those after I sort of click through the rest of it, and I'll come back to the slide in the end. So as mentioned by my colleagues, some of the aspects that we need to integrate in order that you can sort of start right away into integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion from a health perspective is to have that collaboration. So that's, that one part of it is that BetterByDiversity challenge is one way to incorporate that collaboration. But compassion plays a huge role. I talk about nutrition and food. Food is one of the greatest equalizers because we all got to eat. So why not have wonderful conversations around food? Go and explore different types of food. That's a great sort of stepping stone. If you don't know where to begin a conversation, food is a wonderful place. And I talk a lot about food and mental wellness because that really brings about that area of compassion. Individuality plays a unique role as well, because we have to understand that individuals are unique, groups are diverse. So we need to respect that individuality within each person. And so, and if this, oops, I'll just click here. So if this is something that's of interest to you and you want to further up and have more conversation around this, Pasteur University Clinic is a place where you can access health from a naturopathic perspective. Like I mentioned, I'm a clinical supervisor there. We, as naturopathic doctors, we don't take insurance unless you have a health spending account. However, at the clinic, because it's a student run, it's a teaching clinic, our prices are comparable to what you do at what you get at a copay. We have both telemedicine and in-person appointments available there, and that's in San Diego, in Sereno Valley. Alternatively, my own private practice, and if you want to have conversations with me, you can access me at foodandmood.co, and that's a telemedicine-based practice. And I'll just go back here and to show you these quick resources. So UCSD has a lot of excellent anti-racism resources where you can go through. So you can go through and watch tons of videos, lots of conversations or TED Talks. So if you want a place to begin, UCSD's anti-racism resources is a really good place to start. Further to that, the AAMC. So, and this is great because it comes from the medical doctors, so conventional medical doctors' perspective. So if you want to know how should diversity and inclusion be incorporated within my own healthcare, irrespective of naturopathic or conventional medical care, you've got all these sort of things that you can look at as well. Okay, so that's the AAMC's Diversity Inclusion Toolkit resources that you can access as well. Okay, and that's it for me.
All right, thank you so much. And great resources, great tools, great tips. So I encourage you all to follow up with Dr. Kamba and also check out those resources that she shared. So now we're just gonna pass things along to Amanda, who is going to moderate a Q&A. So take it away, Amanda.
Hi guys, and yes, great presentations by everybody. We have some fantastic questions. And if I'll start off with Dr. Baljeet, what is VIS, or how do I say VIS?
VIS.
VIS.
So, yeah, so naturopathic medicine. So have you guys ever heard of the word chi or prana, or, you know, the energy that we all use? Sort of, if those are common words for you guys, those, and if they're not, that's okay too. It's sort of what we talk about, sort of being the breath that differentiates the living from the dead. So vis is that sort of healing power, the energy. We all draw upon energy to heal. It's not enough just to like throw, you know, nutrients or, you know, medications or anything that we're doing for a person. The other aspect is we've got to have that energetic aspect to healing too. So that's what vis means. So including when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusions, it's not enough just to say the words. We can say the words as much as we want. We need to have that energy and that flow and that intention behind it.
Nice, I love that. And as I say, it's all about the energy, right? Everything that we bring to the table, it's so important. And this helps us with the stress, especially with everything happening now. It's just keeping in that positive and creating that positive energy and the vibes. So thank you for that. And if I may ask Sanjeet, how can people get involved and participate in Jelly's social BetterByDiversity events? Say if they wanted to host one in their local city or in their organization, what would be the best way to do so?
Best thing to do is just to get in touch with us. So I'm gonna put my email here in the chat. So we've worked with cities, we work with schools, we work with the conference organizers and things of that nature. So, you know, if diversity and inclusion is on your agenda, it's really best to have a conversation either with me directly through that email I've just posted. And we're more than happy to co-host events alongside your organization. Because again, just a little bit of structure, a little bit of guidance in how we can actually make diversity, equity, and inclusion real can go a long way. And inviting your employees as part of the process, inviting people in your community as part of the process is a great way to make that happen.
Okay, fantastic. And yes, I think it'll be great to, spread the awareness and get more individuals, organizations involved in more of the events, and having those conversations I find are so important. And if I may ask, back to Dr. Baljeet. So sorry for the background noise. This is Zoom Life. If I may ask, back to Dr. Baljeet. So what is the difference, and how are naturopathic doctors different from conventional medical doctors?
That's a really good question to ask. So the difference between a naturopathic doctor and ND is that we're focused on prevention. We're focused on proactive care from the standpoint of, and then our tools that we'll use to help to treat a person. So, when we're focusing on prevention and proactive medicine, then what we're going to do is we're going to focus on things like diet and lifestyle and counseling and nutrition and all those types of great things, and look at the person as a whole, as rather than just looking at disease and diagnosis. So we can work alongside your conventional medical doctors, or we can work as an alternative. You can have either way. I work usually with health teams. Sometimes I work with psychiatrists, sometimes I work with oncologists, I work with all sorts of people. So, so that's the idea, is that naturopathic medicine is really focused around sort of that preventative, proactive care, using from that viewpoint of sort of looking at things from, and using supplements and all that sort of stuff.
I have a question actually for Fazina. We have those slides up about the unconscious biases and the iceberg and all that kind of stuff. I kept thinking one thing really in particular. So I do a lot of meditation, and I found that to be, for me, just a really powerful tool to understand the things I was carrying that I didn't even realize. So that for me has been really, really helpful, but I'm also looking for other things that I can do as well, just to help me with those unconscious biases. Is there anything in particular that you would suggest?
Absolutely. So that's great, like meditation, just being able to calm your mind, and sometimes, creates that environment where we're able to have those awarenesses come up for us. But, the number one thing I tell people is, when you don't know where to start and you're just looking at starting out and figuring it out, is just to really become curious. Like, really become curious. And I mean, whether, you're working with a team, or you're assembling a team, or hiring someone, or you're hiring a coach or a consultant, or someone that you're making a decision about, like, start asking yourself, like, why am I hiring this person, or why am I connecting with this person? And just out of curiosity, see what comes up for yourself. Right. And it's not about, judging yourself for having unconscious bias. I think a lot of us do that. And that's probably why we don't want to go there, because it doesn't feel good to realize that we have these ideas and these beliefs. But it's not about judgment, right? The only way that we're going to break through these unconscious biases and make shifts in the way that we want to, is to actually become curious and depersonalize ourselves from that. And ask those questions, so that we're no longer being led by things that are outside of our awareness, and instead making very conscious decisions that will create change and sustainable change.
Somebody actually gave me this wonderful analogy of just things that we're carrying. So basically, the way they present it is that when we walk through life, we have this huge imaginary backpack, and we're just unconsciously throwing things in there and collecting them in our backpack as we're going through life. And we never actually empty it out. But what happens over time is, if you imagine a really heavy backpack, it just starts to weigh us down. Every step is with effort. Every step is not something that we would do in a free way. It's something that's really burdened. So the thing that they really were really trying to drive home was that, every now and then, just taking some time to take that backpack off and take each item out of your backpack and understand, hey, why am I carrying this thing? Is this something that's still useful for me? If yes, I'll put it in this pile. If it's not, if it's no longer required on my journey, I'll put it in a separate pile. And just kind of going through each item one by one until we end up with a pile of things we need and a pile of things that we can discard. Pick the stuff up that we need, put it back in our backpack, and carry on with our journey. So I find that just like for me, it was just a great way to understand, what I'm carrying and understand, why am I actually carrying that? And go through a process of eliminating those things that are no longer useful.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And when you talk about that backpack, like we're talking about everything from how we view relationships and how, we handle our health or how we deal with money and all of that. Like today, we just talked about a really small portion of what, it lies in our unconscious. But yes, that backpack can get quite heavy if we're not tending to what's in there. So thank you for sharing that.
No, great analogy. I love it. And it's just being, again, more conscious of that and what we're carrying around, because just day to day, we don't realize. And I know we have about 5 minutes before we wrap up here. So on that note, how does uncovering conscious bias connect with living well? Back to Fazina.
Yes. So, it really goes back to recognizing where we're creating harm for others and, shifting that, because at the end of the day, it's not healthy for us if we're creating harm for other people. It's obviously not healthy for them if they're in an environment where there's harm. So it's one of those things where it's for everybody, right? When we look at a system, it's like we can't just have one part of the system working and the other part not, right? We need to all collectively do this work to create environments where we can all live well in. And this is one part of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, very well said. And Dr. Baljeet, how can patients act as their own advocates? What do you recommend?
I think that's a really good question. So when it comes to advocating for your own health, one of the biggest things you can do is actually just ask questions. Like, just as Fazina had talked about curiosity as being a big part of this, that's really where it comes from, is the idea of just asking questions. If there's something, even like an inkling of something you're wondering about, don't depend on Dr. Google searching for your answers on the internet, which is, is a whole other thing, but really ask the questions, go to the providers, ask those questions. If you're not getting answers, ask them, who can I talk to get answers? Because I need to, who can deal with the fact that I'm a South Asian woman with breast cancer and I want to know what are my rates of getting cancer again, or what are some alternatives that I can use? And if you can't answer that for me, who else can? Who can I talk to? So be curious, ask questions, and don't take no for an answer. I think those are some of the greatest things that we can do, and educate yourself. And then, and the other part is sometimes when we're advocating for ourselves, I think the words advocate also come out as anger, those two A words, when really we need to look at advocacy and compassion. So being understanding that not, the person that you're directing your questioning, your curiosity towards may not have the answer, but be understanding and know that there are other answers. And if they don't have it, you'll find out somewhere else. And so coming at it with compassionate advocacy.
Yes, and great point. And I think this is a challenge with conventional medicine. The traditional doctors, sometimes they're all about their own specific way. So can natural medicine be integrated with conventional medicine?
Definitely. So I work my prior history is I've had 10 years experience working in psychiatric clinics. So I work with psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, all sort of together in integrative models. And so that's so those are some great models where I work. And then at Bastyr, I work with some medical doctors there. If there's medical doctors particularly who might be who I might collaborate with, or outside of sort of the Bastyr network, I usually collaborate with other doctors in the area. And I, whoever my patient is seeing, I'll make sure to write a letter to. If they're coordinating care, say for example, I have some patients who might have a psychiatrist and a psychologist, I'll make sure to write letters to them and let them know that we're all collaborating in their care.
And that's the key. It's collaboration. And, just especially with the journey that you were on, you were able to combine both. And congratulations on your health and your success as well. So that's fabulous. And I know we're just on the wrap up. So before we head out, did you guys want to leave your contact information in the chat box for those to get in contact with you for more information, more education? I think this is a fabulous talk. great way to learn about the diversity, inclusion, and different ways that we can incorporate that into our lives, organizations, professions. And anything else, Sanjeet, you wanted to add before we go?
Nothing else from my end, but just a really heartfelt thank you for everyone, all of our presenters, our moderators, of course, and all of you for taking the time to absorb all of this today. So thank you so much, and really hope to connect with you all.
Yes, and thank you guys. We appreciate you guys being part of the room. For all our speakers, amazing job, fabulous information, education, and great takeaways. I believe we all got some great nuggets from you guys today. So look forward to seeing more talks and hopefully seeing everyone that participated in the conversation today. Hopefully we can definitely connect with you again on another platform. So thank you guys for having us, and I think we're at that time. Have a great night and good evening. Take care.